And welcome back to a new episode of How Do I Beat This. Today we're going to be having a look at a replay of Topspin. Who is playing against the Zerg. He struggles against Zerg. We see if we can help him out. We're going to be going just very in depth into the general play. There wasn't too many big struggles, but we're going to just focus on lots of small details here and there, just making sure that everything our friend Topspin does is indeed correct. So far I like it. We see a 16 gateway, 14 pylon, 17 gas, so just a standard 1 gate expand. Start harassing the probes. Now I always tell people harassing the probes is the last thing that gets added to your list, right? If you know exactly how to do your build order and you're not floating any minerals while executing your build order, so basically the way Topspin is doing right now, 400 minerals, he gets the nexus, then you're allowed to be harassing probes. But if you build your nexus even just at 420 or 430 minerals, harassing the probes is just not going to be worth it. So make sure you get all your buildings down exactly on time, just like Topspin does. See, the cyber core is 1 supply too late. He built it at 21 rather than at 20. Now his gas is going to be at 22 and his pylon is going to start too late. So he's going to actually walk into a little supply block. The actual build order for a 1 gate expand is 20 nexus, 20 cyber, 21 assimilator and 22 pylon. Just like that. But he had to build a pylon at the end of 22 supply basically. And now he kind of had a weird supply block. He lost a worker on the other side of the map. I guess into a drone line or something. I didn't quite see how. So it caused him to not be supply blocked, but yeah. Just to try to pay attention to that. So we have a adept straight warp gate into robotics facility. I'm not a big fan of this build order. I'm going to have to admit. I think the most 2 common build orders right now that have the most success are either a 4-gate glaive build or some variation of that, or just a single, double, or triple oracle opener. So basically anything with Stargate really, that isn't many phoenixes from 1 Stargate, I think is pretty good. You see Robo into Twilight. That is really quite odd. So the only thing this is really used for is usually for Immortal Charge All-ins or Immortal Glaive All-ins. Because if you want a DT drop or if you want a glaive build, you would want to build the Twilight before the robotics facility. Okay, and he opens with Observer. I don't really like this build, honestly. You're not going to be able to put a lot of pressure on your Zerg opponent. So if the Zerg player is good, he's going to just be able to drone up to a very decent drone count. This is at a pretty decent level. It's about 4.1k MMR. What I said in the replay. Okay, yeah, we do have a charge opener here. But for charge openers, it would make more sense to open charge before Robo. Like, you can actually play some charge openers and they're not even that bad. But you would have to play charge or Twilight into Robo, and then you add like 3 gates, so you go up to 4 gates in total. So you would play it very similar to how you play a 4-gate glaive adept build. And that's not really the case here for Mr. Topspin, who also, even though he's getting charge and a prism, only has 2 gateways and is only warping in adepts and stalkers for now. So that's not really the way. I want to just make everyone aware as well right now that the power of actually executing a build order correctly is very, very big. So for example, I did a guide recently on a 4-gate glaive build, which I think is called the $65,000 build or something like that. And in this build order, I hit with 8 adepts at 426 with glaives. I'm at the opponent's side of the map. Now imagine you can hit at this timing or even 5 seconds later than that. Like I can give you 5, maybe even 10 seconds. Let's imagine if you hit at 435, okay? If you hit at 435 with 8 adepts with glaive at your opponent's base, this guy at 4.1k MMR has 4 links. His Roach Warren isn't done. He has a layer on the way, which is nice. And he has 40 workers, 43 workers, which is similar to what I had. Like, this is the power of actually having a very good build order that you know how to do. And even if you're 10 seconds late, a lot of the time you will still be able to do a lot of damage. And then people will tell me, well, yes, but the only reason you're winning then is because you have a good build order. Right, but you're also executing it properly, and that's the hard part usually. Like, I can give a good build order to my dad, but my dad would have absolutely no clue what to do with a good build order. He'd look at it and just... Actually, I once let him play a game, and he just built probes and pylons for 15 minutes until the AI attacked him. Then he said, well, this wasn't too much fun. Like, actually having a build order and executing it well is such a big part of the game. I think it's also really quite fun to practice just against the AI. Just making sure that you can get your build order down. And the 4-gate glaive is pretty difficult to do, but yeah, it really helps your play, and all the follow-ups make so much more sense afterwards as well, because at this point what we have is an Immortal as a follow-up, a third base. There's still no real pressure on our opponent. We're already 5 minutes and 30 seconds in. I mean, I like the scouting with the observer, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the time against Zerg, you're not really scouting with an observer or with a hallucination, but initially you're scouting through pressure. So whether that's oracles or whether that's charge, you get your information by attacking. You don't necessarily get your information by sending in units that are specifically made for scouting. So this kind of stuff, like, he needs to show what he has if you're attacking your opponent, right? So right now, you see, okay, he has 8-9 roaches. That's good information. You know he has a roach warren. You know he invested larvae into roaches. You can click his unit. You can see, hey, does he have any upgrades yet? Like, this is all information that you just purely get by attacking. Same with oracles. You can see, if you attack the third base, you could see, hey, there's no gases on this third base. That's a little weird. I want to keep an eye on that, you know? It's important to know how many gases the opponent has, because Zerg players that stay on 4 gases are most likely going to be doing something aggressive. But if they're going up to 6 gases, they're probably looking into getting a couple more drones for those gases as well, right? So we can come back later to see if those gases have been saturated. And this is why you always try to get information through pressure or through just harassment. Like, harassment is not just a way to do damage. Of course, it is important to deal damage with harassment a lot of the time, but it also just gives you a good amount of information. Now, this is the kind of run-by that I'm not a big fan of, right? If we take a look at the current game state, we look at topspin's vision and his overall feeling of this game. So, not aware that there is a third base. Well, like, he might know, but he doesn't know about the gases, drone count, anything. Not aware there's a fourth base. No vision in the middle of the map. No vision in this general area. The middle, so this and this, are the main 2 areas that we're gonna need to have covered, being the Protoss player on a map like Everdream. This area, less important, less common, people attack through it. The middle and the top are the main 2 areas. It helps for army positioning, it helps for our run-bys that we have set up, or our prism. Just so we can do our counterattack. So we always are gonna need vision there. Now we have 2 adepts in our army, so we can just put 1 adept here in the bushes. We can put 1 adept here, and we already have way more vision. Now, the problem I have with the run-bys that Topspin is doing is that he's doing them as nothing is happening. Absolutely nothing. He's not being attacked. He's not attacking. Run-bys usually do well if they can be 2 things. They can either be a distraction. So you send in 3 zealots over here, and the Zerg goes like, oh, I want to go kill those zealots. And then, I know, you run up the ramp, or if there's a fourth base here, you kill this base. You know? It's a distraction. Or you send 3 zealots here, and then you walk into the natural. Or you send 3 zealots into the main, and then you kill this fourth base, you know? Something happens. Or he's across the map with his entire army, and you send in 3 zealots here. Then he needs to make a decision. Hey, do I have enough reinforcements to deal with this? Do I need to go back with my entire army? You want to let the Zerg make decisions and kind of second guess his attack. These are good. This is good. This is very good. This is exactly what you're supposed to do and what I just said. So this probably cost him 2 seconds to set up. He sends 1 zealot here, 1 zealot here, 1 zealot to the middle, 1 zealot to this part, and all of a sudden his vision increases like infinitely. And this prism becomes a lot stronger as well. Now you don't actually need to do anything with this prism, and you don't need to do anything with these zealots until something happens on the map. Once you see movement and one of your zealot dies, it's like, ah, okay. Well, this just means that I can go in with my prism, or I can send in my 2 zealot run by. +1. Now usually what I say, if you follow any of my build orders, is that I usually say is you get +1 together with charge, and you get +2 together with storm, and that's exactly what topspin is doing. He's getting his +2, which is important, kind of together with storm. He's playing against a lurker-based army. Now, I've mentioned this before, but lurker-based and high roach-based armies are really the only times you might want to think about adding a second robo. You can also just really continue hard on immortal production, but I don't actually mind adding a second robo there, just purely because everything the Zerg does get hard countered by immortals in this case. So a second robo would make some sense for a higher immortal count. People always ask me, what about disruptors? I'm not a big fan of disruptors because they have really big hard counters in both the Viper and the Baneling are extreme, and even Lynx are like extreme hard counters of the disruptor. So it's not really a unit that is great the longer the game goes. The Immortal is just way more all around, works better with an Archon army as well, works better with Storm. Disruptor is kind of clunky to use as well against Zerg. I'm just not a massive fan of it, honestly. And if you get to the higher levels, you'll notice that you actually never will be able to hit any of the Zerg units with your Purification Novas either. That's why we don't see it a lot. I don't mind that topspin isn't really doing anything at this point. I mean, he doesn't really need to. The problem that I do see with him is that he's lacking a little bit in information. So he's not aware of a lurker then. He's not aware of a Hydra then even. He is aware of one Evo, but that's practically it. And he knows there's 8 gas. So this really could be a lot of things. Like this could be Muta for all he knows, you know? He doesn't actually have any vision on his opponent where he's like, okay, I know what his army is. So you kind of want to figure out what your opponent's army is. And just seeing, okay, he has 20 roaches isn't quite enough because roaches cost no gas. You always want to know where the gas is going because that's the important resource for Zerg as well. Just like with Protoss, it's like if you can figure out where the gas is going, you know everything basically, because that's always the limit, or almost always the limiting factor. Like for all we know right now, there could be 25 mutas on the way, you know? And then all of a sudden, topspin is in a really bad position. I mean, there's no cannons. Oops. He has no blink, no stargates, no nothing. He would just absolutely lose the game immediately. So it's just something to keep in mind, to try and check that stuff. I also don't mind getting a blind cannon in every single base once I take my 4th base usually. Helps a little bit against lower muta count. So imagine someone makes like 8 mutas or 9 mutas. Having the 1 cannon could really save you there. Of course, if they have 25 mutas, it kind of becomes irrelevant. What the hell is this? How many DTs is he building? 14 DTs. Okay. So I actually... I think this is really bad to warp in DTs, because usually against Zerg, DTs... Okay, DTs are fine in small numbers. So if you have 1 DT per base, that's completely fine. But sending 14 DTs are just like worse, more expensive zealots. Well, not worse, slightly better, but just more expensive zealots. But if a DT is going to die most of the time, or if a zealot, yeah, if a DT is going to die, your zealot will also die, and the other way around. So it feels like it's kind of useless to get DTs, you know? They don't have very good escape because he doesn't even have Shadow Stride yet. But even with Shadow Stride, against Zerg, I always think just zealots do a kind of not a better job, but a more efficient job for sure. So right now DTs are just getting chased away. This would be a fantastic time for a run by to go into the 3rd or into the 4th base. And this is kind of why you always want to have 2 sides of the map occupied with run bys. So you put 8 zealots over here. You can put a prism in this bottom corner. You know, you don't want to leave the prism out here. It might get sniped by hydras or something like that. And then what you do is you try to find which bases are naturally weak. So this base would be naturally strong. It has what? 6 spines. It has a queen as well. So then you just go by that base. It's like, well, you don't need that. Warp in 4 zealots, and you just rally them like this on the mini-map. Whoop, whoop. Straight into this base, forcing him to most likely go back, or to leave your DTs alone over here. This recall was okay, and I guess he can just send them out again. Getting in position would seem rather important at this point. You scouted army composition, and it's important to figure out, hey, what exactly is, you know, where do I need to position my army? How do I work here against lurkers? It's really the only thing that matters, is being in position with your army. The moment you're caught out of position once, usually you kind of just start chasing the facts. Like, you're not the one in control anymore. You're the guy that needs to respond to your opponent. But if you're in a good position initially, a lot of the time you can kind of stop them from burrowing where they want to. It actually is a good fight. Pretty decent storms as well. Big immortal count. Something you can do against lurkers and against invisible stuff in general, no matter what it is to have one observer. Like right now, we see topspin had 2 observers anyway. So what you can do is you put 1 observer in your main control group, and 1 observer you move command on the unit with the biggest range. So it stays kind of far to the back, but still close enough that if your first observer dies, you can pull the second one. So in this case, you would move command on one of the immortals. That way you will, it will just fly behind a little bit, which is nice. Because now I think if the Zerg was a little bit better at flicking with Hydras, you would have been able to get both of these observers. And then all of a sudden the lurkers are way more annoying, right? Another thing you can do, of course, is to get an oracle and try to fight it that way. Like use revelation, stuff like that. Now, once again, there's no real... I actually kind of like topspin's macro, I'm not gonna lie. Like, he has actually pretty proper macro, has a lot of bases, a lot of units, good unit composition. Scouting is a little bit off, and the harass seems to be a little bit so-so, but overall I think it's pretty fine, it's pretty decent. I wouldn't mind seeing some extra cannons at extra bases. Always refresh your vision when you lose it, so right now some time should be invested. Getting a zealot here, zealot here, zealot here. Basically every new base you get, at this point in the game, you want to have 3-4 cannons. This kind of starts at your 4th base. So the moment you build a 4th, once you get your gases going, you add like 4 cannons or 3 cannons. And you can add a Templar as well. Now over here you want to add 3-4 cannons, maybe a Templar, here 3-4 cannons. Here actually this one's pretty far out, I might even get 5 cannons and a battery, 2 batteries, and a Templar. And then a base is a lot safer like that, and you can kind of start sharking on the map if you have a very good army, you know. On top of that, this also is a good time for topspin to actually start working on a transition. It's something I see a lot. He also has too many workers, by the way, way too many. 98 is too much. So usually I say for 3 bases 66, for 4 bases 76, for 5 bases. If you get them very fast, like 80, and otherwise just stay around 76. 76 is a very good number of probes, where you have a good balance of high eco, and you still are able to get a big army as well. Something I see a lot, especially around diamond level, is that people will be very slow at transitioning into air. Or into sky pulls. And as we see it, we actually see him throw down a couple of Stargates, so I do like that. What I like, if you're diamond and you notice that you're often too late with your sky pulls transitions, absolutely ridiculous. Oh, blink away. Okay, Shadow Strike just finished now. Okay. What I usually suggest is for people to take a time in the game where you look at the clock. So you kind of get triggered by a time. So imagine we take 11 minutes in the game. And if you're floating more than 1,000 resources of each, that you just throw down if you already have a Stargate, 2 extra Stargates and a fleet beacon, or otherwise you just throw down 3 Stargates and get your fleet beacon later. So just kind of work by timing on things, you know. So be like, all right, 10 minutes, I'm gonna look at my supply, I'm gonna look at my bank, and if I float more than 1,000 resource, I just start my air transition. I just go into carriers with +1. That's going to be it, all right? You're just going to go into carriers with +1. Now this might sound like, well, but what if he's still all-inning me or something like that? Well, in that case, you obviously don't want to be doing it, but if you're floating 1k, might as well try to spend that money a bit, you know? So just try to find like a timing there for you, whether that's 10 minutes or 11 minutes. If you see yourself have some resources, just add these extra structures. Now later on, you can then, you know, kind of perfect the technique of when to transition, but you'll never know, you'll never learn when it is right to get into air if you never actually play air. And a lot of people, they always ask me like, hey, when's the correct time to transition into Skytals? And the answer actually just is, you transition into Skytals once you feel safe or when you have money for it. And if you have money for it, you just want to transition into it. The reason why you don't see it as much at high level PvZ is because as a Protoss player against high level Zergs, you probably never feel safe. A lot of the time you're busy dying or busy trying to kill your opponent as fast as possible. So I do like this carrier transition as well. Don't forget to get the upgrades, because this is something that people tend to forget. If you have, if you bring in carriers, they're like, man, they don't do a lot of damage against these, like even something like Hydras. But it's because Hydras right now have +3 carapace, and carriers have a lot of small different attacks. So if you're not actually doing any attack upgrades, you're just going to be walking into a +3 carapace, and you're hardly going to be doing any damage with your carriers. This is not really the way you ever want to fight, by the way. Always try to fight with Templar, with, well, preferably Immortals, and kind of in a consistent way. Like you don't want to, like you want everything to attack at the same time, not first run in with the Zealots, then come in with the carrier. So 1-2 High Templar here would have helped a lot, but obviously you should always try to aim for 3-4 High Templar in every single army. For Storm, especially against Hydras, is really powerful. So yeah, Templar do get added now. Don't just go into Archons like that. Should definitely have stayed on Templar. +2. I mean, this game looks pretty good for topspin. I think he'll go for a win here. But yeah, still a lot of things. I mean, even now, once again, we see the complete lack of vision. And this is also, like, you can't always guarantee that you'll have vision. And that's why the extra cannons on the bases are so important, right? Just be able to get, like... And they might die, right? Like, if you have 4 or 5 cannons and he comes in with 30 Hydras, your cannons are probably gonna die. If you have a Templar there, you know, you might be able to actually kill some Hydras, but... Yeah, your cannons are still gonna die, but it does win some time, it does kill some unit, and it also helps against smaller run-bys. Imagine it's only 10 Hydras, and all of a sudden he can't do anything. And that's very important to remember. That the cannons are mainly for like the medium and the smaller run-bys. Otherwise you need to start adding some Templar there, and then you should be fine. So, yeah, carriers are really quite powerful in PvZ. I think the lower level you are, the better carriers are, because Zerg needs very many different spellcasters in order to be able to deal with carriers. Especially if you start adding a couple of Void Rays in. So when you go into Skytals, you want to get like 8-9 carriers, and you add 4 or 5 Void Rays just to deal with high corruptor counts, which is quite smart to do. And then, you know, you get as Tolls, you get Templar, you get some Archons, you can get a Mothership, maybe an Oracle to tag your opponent's air or ground army. I mean, this should never work. I don't think there's a single upgrade here on these corruptors either, right? Yeah, no, there's one air attack upgrade, but +2 air attack does very well against corruptors without armor upgrades. That's another reason. A lot of Zergs forget it as well, of course. They spend all day long on their ground upgrades, and then when they get air, they get like +1 attack, no second spire, nothing for extra upgrades. So I think it's a pretty decent game here by topspin. Is probably just gonna aim it to victory at this point. exactly what he does. So, pretty solid game. I hope you all enjoyed this this episode of How Do I Beat This. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button as it helps me a lot. And see you all next time for a new video. Bye bye.